Hi, everyone, this is Lala, and today I am continuing the Big Brother Archetype slash Stereotypes series that I'm doing, and this is the second to last one that I'm completing, as now this one involves, or I'm going to be covering the religious God worshippers archetype, and it's pretty much very self-explanatory what this one's going to be about. These are people who are very religious, and that's a huge part as to why they were cast, whether they mention it a lot in their intro package or they them talking about it a lot makes it into the edit of their seasons. And it's a part of their journey on the edit. So it's very emphasized, and you can tell that's one of the main reasons why the producers look at them. There aren't as many people in this category compared to most of the other ones, and it seems to have kind of gotten phased out within recent years. So this one's not going to be very long, but we're just going to go through it. So the first person that I'm putting in this archetype is Jason from Big Brother 3. And I think what's interesting with him compared to many of the others that came after him is that how his religion or how his religious beliefs are portrayed on the show was seen as something taken very seriously. It wasn't a joke or used for comedic relief like it was in a lot of the later iterations of this archetype, but that could be attributed due to the editing of the show being different in all the other eras after the classic era. Obviously, Jason talked about being very religious. He was heavily involved in the church. His family's heavily religious, and he tied his virginity to religion as well. And due to this, he was cast as the God loving, innocent guy, and it definitely worked for him throughout the season. And he kind of attributed that in his gameplay, where he was working alongside Danielle, and she was kind of coaching him to do certain things. Though she would kind of get the bad rap due to her being the bad guy and her not hiding from it, where he was seen as someone who was relatively innocent. So I feel like he got a good edit, but it was accurate because that's just who he was, very unproblematic and could do some dirty gameplay, but his religious beliefs were respected by the editors and it wasn't made fun of, and everyone respected him for it. So the next people that I have from Big Brother to make it on here is from Big Brother 5 with Adria and Natalie. I don't think anyone from Big Brother 4 really fits this, though there was one segment of Nathan Alston reading the Bible, but I don't feel like that was their portrayal overall on that season. So with Adria and Natalie, they talked about religion a lot in the house, and they used it to bond with people like Drew and Cowboy and all that other stuff, and they would kind of use it in their gameplay. A lot of it was hidden from the episodes and the edits for the first 3 weeks, though I do think a part of that was due to them being separate and playing as one so they could enter the house as their own people. But obviously, when they won HO, or Adria won HOH, she referenced the Bible, or she let the Bible speak to her to tell her who to nominate, as well she let God tell her. And then this caused for Marvin and Will to be on the block, and a lot of people felt weirdly about this because God told her to nominate the black guy and the gay guy. And then even afterwards, they would kind of just use religion to kind of weaponize things in their favor, which they did in earlier weeks too. And then in the latter weeks, once they were isolated and they're on their way out, we'd have segments of them, especially Adria just reading the Bible to herself. And yeah, it seemed like their religious beliefs and how they used it in the game was definitely trashed by the cast, the fans, and the edit. So the final person from this era that I do have on here is Kesa, who obviously debuted on Big Brother 6 and then competed on Big Brother 7 and 22. So literally he was the last minute addition, and I didn't have him on my initial list that I have on my Word document, and I made a decent amount of the video before I realized, okay, I need to add him. And I think the reason for that is because I was looking at this list through the Christian lens, since whenever religion is discussed on the show, 9.5 times out of 10, it's Christianity. So I can't just overlook the very few exceptions of people who were very religious and who did have that content in the house but weren't Christian. So obviously, Kaysar believes in the religion of Islam. He got a lot of content about it on Big Brother 6 and somewhat Big Brother 7. We saw him praying. Even in his intro package, he was doing his religious duties. He talked about how it isolated him from others and the Islamophobia that came from it, since they were still a few years post 9/11 on his first two seasons. So we saw him adapt to that. And of course, a lot of people had something to say about it. People outright mocked his religion at Yvette. Some people accused him of being a hypocrite and hiding behind his religion, or the Allah, which Eric did. Some of the content was still there during Big Brother 7, but I do feel like the producers and fans kind of like lost their luster for him, and they're much bigger personalities. On Big Brother 22, he did mention that he came back due to representation, but I think by the time of Big Brother 22, you'll notice, even as I go through the video, and especially at the end of the video, they stop talking about religion overall and stop casting people for their religion within like the most recent years. Hence why that content from him really didn't make it onto the episodes in Big Brother 22. Though his religion was edited with nuance on his first two seasons, though it's interesting that someone else who was Islam didn't get that coverage, and I think it also had to do with this just being the classic era. So, yeah. So that was it for the classic era, and now we're moving on to the post-classic era. And this is the first and maybe only season where two people on the list are represented by one season, with the first one being Amber. So when I initially made my list, she wasn't on the list, but as I thought more and more and more about it, she definitely fits this because she talked about religion a decent amount, and it made it on the episode. She kind of used God to justify who was deserving and who wasn't deserving. She prayed a lot, which was definitely rightful for her. And in her diary rooms, and especially when she voted, she would always pull out the cross that she wore as a necklace, and she would say that she's doing all these good things and she's godly or whatever, but she was lying and deceiving, and she was very braggadocious about it, and she would say some of the vilest stuff ever. But her edit was nothing compared to the person that I'm going to discuss right now. So, Jamaica is from Big Brother 8, and despite her not really being a big name in the Big Brother universe, I think she's arguably the most infamous example of this archetype, where so much of her content was about God doing things God way, letting God dictate her how to play the game, though she would state that it was predetermined. There's the whole ping pong ball situation with Jen. She prayed a lot, and the edit definitely made fun of it. Yeah, I think some of it was for comedic relief, and other parts of it they just thought she was ridiculous. So they really, really played into it, and you could tell by this point they weren't editing it with nuance compared to the likes of Jason, which was 5 years before this example. And then, of course, there was her fight with Evil Dick that had religion being involved because he used that to attack her, and she obviously defended herself due to it, where he was calling her and Amber a bunch of hypocrites, faux religious people, and all that. The typical stuff that people who aren't religious tend to say to people who are religious, and tend to be contradictory in some ways, or at least in their opinion. So there was a lot of that, and there wasn't much nuance to her edits when it comes to anything outside of her being religious, which was a wasted opportunity, in my opinion. So, you know the saying, you hit two birds with one stone? We're hitting four birds with one stone here, as there are four people from Big Brother 9 that fits this archetype, and that's easily the most out of anyone specifically within this archetype. And it's even more ironic because it's Big Brother 9, which is seen as arguably the trashiest, raunchiest, and the most ghetto season ever, has four people of this archetype in it. Very interesting to say the least. So I'm going to talk about David and Sharon. They are both very religious. They came from very religious families. It was one of the reasons why they ended up dating, and they did it for a while. And obviously, casting would know that they were very religious, and even in their intros, both of them kind of mentioned it. Obviously, David wasn't around long, so we didn't get to see how this would have played out when it comes to his religion and how he attributed it to his gameplay. Sharon, she was very religious. She definitely talked about it in the house, and she definitely had her moments where it was addressed on the edits, but it wasn't portrayed in the same way as the two others that I have on this list. And I think it's because she wasn't in that majority alliance, especially at the time of the jury portion, and people didn't see her as hypocritical due to it. Now, on to the other two. You actually be kind of shocked that they made it on the list, and I don't think the producers intended this, but obviously, with the whole from in week 4 that got James out the first time, and it caused for that the other side of the Sheila, the Adam, the Natalie, the Ryan, and somewhat Matt, though they weren't fully stabilized until after you have formed, they were called Team twice. So obviously you're naming your ally after a religious figure. That's already going to catch certain people's attention in a certain way. Adam read his Bible a lot. He had several Bible segments where he talked about the passages and all that that are in the Bible. There are scenes of him reading it with Matt, with Ryan, and all that stuff, and then he's going off on people because they're interrupting his Bible time. And it's interesting because what you know of him before the show and after the show, you wouldn't think that. But Natalie, it was clear that she was cast to show her stuff and to be the manic pixie dream girl, which she was, which is why she's in that archetype. I feel like out of everyone, she was the one who vocalized the religious aspects of Team Christ. She talked about the evil doers and the good people and all that stuff. She brought up Jesus and God a lot, and it made me in the edit, and because it's Natalie, it was definitely mocked, though a lot of people thought that she was being hypocritical because she would talk about all the sexual stuff that she did and ungodly stuff like abortion, which a lot of the house guests talked about, and she's playing the game more cutthroat and dirty than anyone. So, yeah, that's interesting when it comes to having many people from this archetype on a season, and especially a season that's as lowly regarded as Big Brother 9. So we are moving on to the next season in Big Brother 10, and there are two people who fit this archetype, though how they were portrayed when it comes to their religion is very different. Obviously, the very first person is Ollie. They talked about how he recently lost his virginity due to the fact that he was saving it due to being religious. He talked about how he was a good boy growing up and he followed his parents' requests. I believe they are pastors or whatnot, but he wanted to explore himself and to build more individuality. So when he got into the house, he and April did their thing. He talked about God a decent amount, but it was always kind of just clowned. It wasn't portrayed with any sort of nuance, and it was almost something that was supposed to be mocked. And it didn't help that he didn't get a lot of screen time. So when he did get screen time, it was either that or they showed him being contradictory when it comes to his supposed good boy religious background, with some of the comments he made towards Libra or at the end when he got outplayed by Dan. And yes, he does fit this category because one, his religion was discussed quite a lot in the house during the season, and it was portrayed a lot in the edit as well, with a lot more nuance and a lot more sympathy and a lot more understanding and depth, which wasn't something that Ali was given the chance to do when it comes to how he was portrayed on the edit specifically. Dan's religion was very respected when people called him Judas or said that he needed to put down the Bible or whatever. The producers backed him up. A lot of the house guests backed them up. It was respected. They did not like anyone going after Dan's religion. He talked about how he had to like hide his cross or take off his cross for the first time because of the Jesse thing. I don't know if that was true or not. But yeah, he was definitely given a more multi-dimensional edit when it comes to him being religious as well as him playing the game. And he wasn't portrayed as someone that was hypocritical. So I found the portrayals is very interesting. I don't know if they did this because they really, really, really liked Dan or they didn't find him hypocritical at all. It was also clear from the casting package intro and just from what Dan has stated himself when it came to the application process that he was cast to be the uber conservative religious person. And so that's kind of why, like, when it comes to his intro, it didn't perfectly align with how he actually was in the house. When it comes to Big Brother 14, I don't remember there being much religious content at all. I think it's because he obviously been through the game before. He knew what was acceptable or not. He knew his Big Brother reputation. And whatever guilt he felt during his first time, he didn't feel during the second time. So they just didn't. It's either they didn't air it or he didn't talk about his religion much. And he was playing a lot more cutthroat and out in the open with it. So I guess that's why the content that he had in his first season when it comes to the religion really wasn't there in his second season. So he doesn't really fit it, this archetype, on Big Brother 14. So we are moving on 2 seasons to Big Brother 12, where we have Andrew, and he's another interesting case because, like Kesar, Andrew isn't Christian. He partakes in the religion of Judaism, so he is Jewish. So how his religion affects his life, how he talks about his religion, the I don't want to say the antics, the movements that someone of that religion does is a lot different compared to Christianity, and that's something that is Christianity is a lot more pushed, at least in American media, compared to Judaism. So it was interesting watching Andrew, but I do think because a lot of the house guests weren't used to Judaism, and Andrew's very strict with his rules and some of the stuff he had to do. I remember there are times where he had to like pray for like a bit or like isolate for a bit due to his religion. I don't remember the name of the book of Judaism, but he would read that a lot. And I think he also was kosher, so he couldn't eat certain things. And I think due to a lot of his practices and the way Andrew went about it, it definitely isolated him from the house guests. And he was a very early boot, but it was interesting watching him during the brief time that he was there, since it was something different on a religious point of view. And I don't think that he was mocked for his religion at all. Despite him not lasting long and clearly not being one of the producer favorites, I do think that they portrayed his religion in a relatively nuanced way, especially for the era of Big Brother that he was in at the time. So we are moving on to Big Brother 13, and the representation here is Keith. And obviously, there's not much to say because he was the first boot. But just from his intro package, there's a lot of talk about him being religious, and he came from a religious family. I do think that he was the producer's response to Ollie, where they essentially cast him to fit that role from the religion aspect or the religious aspect and the girl crazy aspect with Keith. He talked about wanting to flirt with all the women. I believe he talked about some of their boobs or women's boobs just in general. And he definitely made some flirty comments during the short time he was in the house. But due to him being the first boot, it didn't lead to much. But just from the short time that he was in the house, his religion was definitely portrayed as a lot more cartoonishly and borderline a joke. So we are moving on 2 seasons, and the final male that we are going to discuss in the video is Howard, who is also going to end the post-classic era as he's from Big Brother 15. What's interesting about him is that his religion was not portrayed as cartoonishly or as much of a joke compared to an Ollie or a Keith or a Jamaica. I, th- but I don't think it was portrayed with much or any nuance either. I think for the reason why it wasn't portrayed as cartoonish is because Howard just didn't have a big personality. He had a very low voice. Some claimed that it was hard to understand him. And I do think that the way he spoke was made fun of, but I don't know if that was tied to religion or just the fact that he was a Southern black man. But he did make his jips about religion and God or whatever every once in a while there. And obviously, he didn't last long in the game. So that's what I have to say about him here. So we are entering the third era, which is the modern era, and this is the final era that this archetype is in, and I think it's because they start phasing it out as this era went on to the point where it really is no longer a thing by the time this era ends and throughout the entire diversity era. But we are moving on a season to speak about Jocasta from Big Brother 16, and honestly, she might be the most infamous example of this archetype, and I do think she's portrayed even more cartoonishly than Jamaica was. And I think that's due to the difference in eras, where even in the modern era, things were a lot more cartoonish and a lot more scripted. With Jocasta, most of her coverage was her religion, essentially, whether they had her say some witty or stupid line in the diary room about it, which not even Jamaica did, but I think they weren't scripting diary rooms like that back in Jamaica's day, but they definitely were in Jocasta's day. Um, she talked about her religion a lot and the Bible, and she didn't like Derek fake praying with her, which is why she voted against him. And yeah, Chicago was definitely very cartoonishly portrayed when it comes to this element. And I think one of the reasons for that was because they also there just wasn't much else to show of her because she wasn't involved in the game like that anyways. So we are moving on 3 seasons to get to the final person in this archetype, and that is Dominique from Big Brother 19. And to be honest, the content that we got from her, we've seen with a few of the other Black women, especially within this archetype, very Christian, very religious. They come from hugely religious families. God is the most important element in their lives. She lives by God. She reads the Bible, and especially because this is the modern era where the diary room's a lot more scripted, she definitely had her scripted lines about God that I'm pretty sure that the producers pushed on her. She felt something was off with her so-called alliance, and that they were turning on her. And she told people about it, and then she referenced the tempter or the snake or whatever. This got back to Paul, obviously, and then he gaslit her to hell and back. And then obviously the alliance or the house started making fun of her for talking in riddles, and they obviously brought her religion into it, which was just a very uncomfortable dynamic. And obviously, Dominique did not last long whatsoever through the game. She was evicted in the third week, and that is it when it comes to this archetype. And she's the final person that I at least recall that fits this archetype. I haven't seen anyone since, but maybe I could be wrong or I just overlooked it. And that concludes this video. And I think this might be one of, if not the only archetypes that eventually got phased out of Big Brother. And I don't know if it was an intentional thing on their end or they just kind of quietly moved on from it unknowingly. But I definitely do think that it's the right thing. When it comes to Big Brother, the edits in the older seasons used to have a lot of nuance to be able to accurately portray the complexities of stuff like religion, but with the diary room since the editing becoming more cartoony and more scripted as the seasons and the eras go on. It just got more and more frustrating and borderline disrespectful to have this archetype on the show and to portray it the way that they did. And it's even worse because a majority of the people who fit this archetype tended to be black people. as well. It was kind of interesting seeing different religions, though that was only the case of two examples that I listed here. But yeah, I definitely do think that I find it interesting that this archetype got phased out when the cast started getting a bit more diverse, even before the diversity era. The last few casts were getting a bit more and more diverse, bit by bit by bit, and that was around the time where this archetype got phased out. There's only two examples of this in the modern era, and then there hasn't been any in the diversity era. I don't know if this may be due to less people being religious or openly non-religious, or the fact that because they had to cast a lot more people of color, you have to show more dynamicism and other elements of them that just don't involve religion, or you can't just cast a religious person who's black for your sole representation. So, anyways, there's only one more archetype that I'm going to cover through a video, and that is the gimmick slash plant slash camera horror archetype. That also isn't a long list. It might be a bit longer than the list that I used for this video, but it's not much. I could easily get it done within a week or so. I already discussed in the last 2 to 3 videos why I'm not making a video on the Outcast, because it's ridiculously self-explanatory. And I've already covered the racial minorities through several videos and series. So that will be it for this video. Once I conclude the gimmick slash pet slash camera horror video, I'm probably going to be posting a bit more randomized videos, just with topics that I find interesting, whether it's Big Brother, The Challenge, Disney, or anything really. And then I'm definitely planning on recapping Survivor and The Amazing Race chronologically, starting next year, kind of like how I did The Challenge and Big Brother. If I can find a lot or most of the real world seasons, I would like to recap that soon, but I don't know if that will even be a thing for much longer. But anyways, thank you all for watching, and I'll be back with more content soon. Bye!